My name is Ruby Lawson. I was born and raised in a small town called Prescott, Oregon, where college diplomas hanging on the wall meant more than kindness or passion. In my household, there was no room for vague dreams, only the plan: graduate with honors, get into a prestigious university, then pursue one of the so-called respectable careers: law, medicine, or academia. My father, Douglas, was a veteran political science lecturer at Oregon State University. He always stood straight, dressed sharply, and spoke as if he were constantly addressing a classroom. My mother, Linda, was the principal of the town's only high school. She believed that every mistake could be avoided if people just followed discipline and tradition. To them, the perfect child was my sister, Natalie Lawson. She could recite the Declaration of Independence at age 4 and got into Harvard Medical School at 18. When she announced her full-ride scholarship, the whole family threw a party. Relatives from all over came. My father raised his glass, eyes gleaming with pride. This is the future of America. That online business nonsense, just childish distractions. That comment was clearly aimed at me. I didn't hate studying, but from a young age, I was far more fascinated by what happened behind the screen than by copying theorems into a notebook. At 12, I fixed a neighbor's jammed printer in exchange for $10 and 2 movie tickets. By 15, I had written my first lines of code to build a simple website for Miss Martin's flower shop, and she got her first online order just 3 days later. On my first oblique PVJ outfit, I felt like a woman in the old days. I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, my mother frowned and said, "You should focus on the SAT. These little hobbies won't get you into Columbia." My father was blunter. He stared at the laptop I was setting up for a client and said coldly, "If you want to be a lifetime tech support girl, keep it up, but don't expect a single dime from us." I smiled, but it was a forced smile. The one thing I was never given in that house was the right to be different. At every meal, Natalie's name was repeated like a sacred chant. Natalie was chosen to present at the Boston Symposium, or Professor Landon said she has natural leadership potential. And me, I was asked, "Ruby, are you retaking the math section of the SAT a 3rd time?" In May of my senior year, our family sat around the dinner table, surrounded by college application packets my father had arranged with care. Stanford, Princeton, Yale. None of it meant anything to me. My heart raced as I said the words I had been holding inside for months. "I'm not applying to college. I want to start my own business. I already have a plan, my first client, and nearly $4,000 saved from designing websites." A fork clattered onto a plate. My mother went silent. My father slowly stood up, his voice slicing through the air like a razor blade. "That's not happening, not under this roof." I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't concern, it was disgust, as if I had just uttered something obscene. I didn't cry. I quietly stood up, walked to my room, and started packing. A week later, I left home with just 3 suitcases, an old laptop, and my determination fully intact. No one saw me off. No one said good luck. They were sure I'd come crawling back, ashamed and begging for forgiveness. My first apartment was on the 3rd floor of a rundown building in the suburbs of Portland, barely 450 square feet, with creaky wooden floors and windows that let in a constant draft, no matter how tightly they were shut. But it was the first space I could truly call my own. The kitchen was so narrow I could touch both walls with my arms stretched out. I placed a second-hand wooden table under the only outlet in the living room and turned it into a makeshift office. Each morning, I brewed coffee with a faded drip machine, then got to work before the sun came up and kept going until the streetlights outside flickered on. There was no salary, no family expectations, just me and a simple idea: helping local artisans sell their products online. I called the platform Rustic Cart. Rustic Cart wasn't groundbreaking, nor was it backed by cutting-edge tech, but I believed in it. Oregon was full of talented people making pottery, candles, hand-woven baskets, but most of them had no idea how to sell their work online. I built simple websites and took a 5% commission from every successful sale. The rest belonged entirely to the seller. In those early weeks, I coded by day and sent cold emails by night to small craft stores. Most never replied. Some asked, "What college are you attending?" When I said I'd never been to college, they fell silent. One even sent back a laughing emoji with the words, "Good luck with that." My bank account emptied faster than I expected. I lived on cup noodles, boiled eggs, and canned beans. Every night, I cranked the heater up to full blast, not just to chase away the cold, but to push back the creeping fear that was starting to seep into every corner of my mind. Once, I called my mother, just to hear her voice. But when I told her I hadn't gone back to school, her answer was immediate. "Then don't expect anyone to be waiting for you." I thought I had grown used to the coldness, but after that call, I sat on the floor of my apartment in silence for nearly an hour. 3 months after launching, Rustic Cart had exactly 2 clients. One was Josie, a soap maker. The other was Walter, an elderly wood carver who lived a 40-minute drive away. Walter called me computer girl and often got my name wrong. He thought it was Lucy, but he still paid me $20 a month to manage his orders. Thanks to them, I was able to cover my first month's electric bill without borrowing from a credit card. I thought things would gradually improve, but one February morning, while dropping off a shipment for Josie, I was rear-ended at the intersection of 15th and Broadway. No one was hurt, but my old Civic refused to start again. The repair estimate was nearly $800, a sum I didn't have. I sat in the middle of my living room, surrounded by rolls of packaging tape and unpaid invoices, wondering, what if I've made the wrong choice? That evening, I decided to attend a local small business meetup at the downtown library, a free event I had scrolled past on a community site before. I didn't know what I was looking for, maybe just the comfort of being in a room with other people trying as hard as I was. That's where I met Marcia Bennett, a woman in her 50s with neatly tied silver hair, simple clothes, and piercing eyes. She was the founder of Ledgerflow, a small business accounting software company, and she was sharing lessons on scaling a product. When the Q&A ended, I waited until the room cleared, then nervously walked up and handed her my homemade business card, nearly dropping it in the process. "I'm Ruby. I run a small platform helping artisans sell online. No degrees, no funding, but I have real clients and real revenue, even if it's small." Marcia was quiet for a few seconds. Then she smiled and extended her hand. "Do you have customer data?" she asked. I nodded, opened my laptop, and showed her the orders and growth charts. Modest but clear. She scanned a few spreadsheets, then said, "You don't need more individual sellers. You need B2B clients." I looked at her, not quite following. "Instead of selling one bar of soap at a time, why not sell your order management software to 50 craft stores? It's the same goal, helping them, but on a larger scale with more value. You already have the model, now it's time to restructure." We talked until nearly 10 p.m. on the walk back. Even though my leg ached from the morning crash, I felt light. A door had opened, and I knew I was ready to walk through it. I renamed the company to Craft Logic Solutions right after my meeting with Marcia. The old name sounded too naive, no longer fitting for the direction we were headed. Under her mentorship, I pivoted from a consumer-facing retail platform to building supply chain management software, tailored specifically for small to mid-size artisan businesses, a market almost no one had tapped properly. The first month post-pivot, I averaged just 3 hours of sleep per night. I rewrote the entire system using a new framework and launched an email campaign targeting independent retail stores across the West Coast. Every new contract helped pay off my car repair debt, cover hosting expenses, and eventually hire a part-time intern, Jared, a UX design student I met at a community meetup. We worked out of my apartment, used boxes of instant noodles as makeshift desks, and hung a whiteboard on the fridge door. It was scrappy, but in that space, Craft Logic began to take form. By fall, after more than 100 failed cold calls, I received an email from the operations department of a handcrafted furniture chain called Maple and Sage. They had 36 locations across 6 states and were using outdated management software from the early 2000s. The sender, Rebecca Tran, wrote, simply, "Here's your software can track inventory per location. Send us a demo." I read that email 10 times. After 5 sleepless days, Jared and I built a live demo that simulated multi-location inventory and order management, featuring a clean dashboard, easy navigation, and intelligent alert systems. When Rebecca called back, she didn't hesitate. "We need this system deployed within 60 days. Can you deliver?" I glanced at Jared. He gave me a thumbs up. "Yes," I said. "But I'll need to meet with your tech team to integrate accounting and shipping APIs." "Where's your office?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "We're remote at the moment, but I can fly to Maple and Sage's headquarters in Denver whenever you need." That first meeting was also my first time stepping into a real office, with clean carpets and an automatic coffee machine. I wore a borrowed blazer and slightly worn shoes, but I stood tall, answering every technical question with the confidence forged in long nights coding on a beat-up laptop. The final contract was signed for $420,000, with $150,000 paid up front to start implementation. I didn't cry. I just sat motionless in the taxi back to my hotel, staring out the window, clutching my backpack like it held an entire new chapter of my life. From that moment, everything changed rapidly. After delivering on our first project, Maple and Sage referred us to 3 more chains, one of them being Craft Hub, a large craft materials supermarket chain based in California. They signed a full system deployment contract for $630,000. I officially incorporated the company in Oregon, rented our first office in Beaverton, and hired 5 full-time employees: software engineers, a project manager, and an in-house accountant. Within 2 years, CraftLogic had offices in Portland, Denver, and San Diego. We served over 60 retail chains, and the platform evolved into a full ecosystem, handling everything from order management and inventory tracking to shipping integration and customer behavior analytics. In our 3rd year, revenue surpassed $1.2 million, with net profit clearing $300,000. By year 4, I was invited to speak at the Women in Tech West Coast Conference, where I shared how simple software tools could transform traditional industries. After my speech, a middle-aged man approached me and handed me his business card with both hands. "I'm Michael Davis, Chief Strategy Officer at Bright Axis Ventures. We've been following CraftLogic since earlier this year. If you're open to an M&A conversation, we have a proposal." I smiled and accepted his card, but made no promises. The following week, I received 3 more acquisition offers. The highest one valued the company at $36 million, an amount that stunned our entire team. Jared blurted out, "If you sell, I'd be happy for you, but please don't. We're not finished." I looked up at the development roadmap pinned to our meeting room wall, where we used colorful sticky notes to track feature modules. I knew exactly where we were and where we were going. I declined all 3 offers, not because the money wasn't enough, but because CraftLogic wasn't just a company. It was proof of the path I chose, the path my family once completely rejected. Selling it now would have felt like sitting back at that old dinner table, silent under their judgmental eyes, nodding in defeat. Even as the company thrived, I maintained an almost extreme level of discretion in my personal life. I still drove my old Subaru, lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Beaverton, and whenever someone asked about work, I simply said, "I build small software tools for craft shops." My family, predictable as ever, only seemed to remember me when discussing disappointment. My mom still called once a month, not to check in, but to update me on how Natalie had just been appointed chief resident at a major hospital in Seattle, or how her husband had published another biochemistry paper in a science journal. I learned to smile and stay silent, but everything changed when my father, Douglas, was laid off after 28 years teaching political science at Oregon State University. Budget cuts eliminated his department, and at 61, he abruptly lost his main source of income. 1 week later, my mother was diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid disorder requiring long-term treatment with specialty medication not covered by insurance. When Natalie heard the news, she gave a flat response. "I'm swamped at the hospital too. I can't help." I sat quietly in my office, staring at a bank statement my mother accidentally sent to an old email address I still had access to. One line stood out. This month's mortgage payment not received, overdue by 16 days. Just below that, a prescription bill totaling nearly $1,800. No one in the family reached out for help. Maybe they still believed I was barely scraping by, too stubborn to go back to school. But I knew if no one stepped in, they would lose their home. I contacted my attorney, Robert Kane, who had helped structure CraftLogic's investment contracts. I asked him to set up a trust fund called Spring Hill Holding, disguised as a support grant from a nonprofit education community initiative. Within a week, Spring Hill began sending monthly payments to cover their mortgage on time. My parents received a confirmation letter from the bank stating that an organization had volunteered to back their loan due to the couple's long-standing contributions to local education. They didn't ask any questions. At the same time, I had Robert establish a shell company, Brightstone Consulting, registered in Boise. Through it, I signed a fake contract with my father, hiring him to write a civic education curriculum manuscript for modern teaching. Compensation? $2,000 per month? No one checked. No one questioned it. My dad began bragging to friends that he'd been appointed as a state-level educational advisor. My mom, relieved, assumed a silent benefactor was helping them through a rough patch. And me, I quietly approved the wire transfers each month, never asking for gratitude. But that wasn't all. Last June, I found out Natalie, my sister, had just given birth to twins. Due to unexpected costs from her C-section, she had to postpone enrolling them in the bilingual daycare she once raved about. A few weeks later, 2 scholarships labeled Northwest Infant Potential Development Fund appeared in the daycare's records, each worth $9,500 a year, for exactly 2 names, Jacob and Lily Winters. Natalie posted on Facebook in all caps, "It's a miracle God always provides in his own way." I read it and gave a dry smile. Over the past 3 years, I've spent more than $120,000 maintaining every form of support, housing, medication, tuition, and my father's nominal income, all of it legal, all of it carefully masked to keep my identity hidden. I lived 2 lives. At work, I was Ruby Lawson, the CEO TechBridge Weekly dubbed the tech sorceress of the artisans sector. I closed million-dollar contracts, spoke at conferences, and flew private when needed. In my family, I was still the dropout daughter, probably selling things online somewhere. Every Christmas, I came home in a basic rental car, wearing an old coat, listening to my mom ask, "Still haven't reconsidered going back to college?" And my dad would slowly nod, as if silently forgiving me for not having made something of myself. I said nothing, still silent, still paying the bills. On time. That year, Thanksgiving fell on a gloomy, rainy day in the suburbs of Salem. I came home with a bottle of Napa Valley red wine, a nearly 40-page color-printed folder, and a USB drive containing the internal presentation I'd delivered at the Seattle Tech Conference back in September. I had waited long enough for this day. When I walked into the house, my mother, Linda, was plating the stuffing onto ceramic dishes, still carrying that air of busyness she wore every year. My father, Douglas, sat in his armchair with the business section of the newspaper spread across his lap, giving me a slight nod instead of a greeting. Natalie came down the stairs, dressed like she was ready for the cover of a medical lifestyle magazine. Her husband, Matthew, had just unbuckled the twins from their booster seats and whispered, "Let's not let the kids mess with Aunt Ruby's weird laptop again. Nobody wants their kid coding by age 3. As I didn't react, just gave a faint smile. Dinner started at exactly 6 p.m., as usual. My mother raised a toast to health and family unity. As expected, my father stood next to deliver a 3-minute speech on Natalie's contributions to the medical field, how lucky we were to have Matthew, an ideal son-in-law who values knowledge, and the joy of watching their grandchildren exceed developmental benchmarks. Not a single word about me. As everyone began carving into the turkey, I gently placed the stack of documents on the table, right in front of my parents. I'd like to share something today. My mother paused, frowning as if I'd just spilled gravy on the tablecloth. Natalie glanced at the papers, lips pressed together with suspicion. I pulled one sheet from the stack and laid it open on the table, a copy of TechBridge Weekly, centerfold featuring a rare photo of me smiling, the headline in bold. Ruby Lawson, founder and CEO of CraftLogic Solution, the software platform reshaping America's artisan market. My father picked up the magazine, flipping through it like he was searching for signs of forgery. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his tone colder than the wind outside. "From my own life. I've been running CraftLogic for 8 years now. The company employs over 180 people across 3 cities. It's currently valued at $47 million. And Mom, Dad, I'm the one behind every bit of support this family has received over the past 4 years." I opened the folder. Bank transfer records from Spring Hill Holding to their mortgage lender. Health insurance documents for my mom funded by a private trust. A fake contract from Brightstone Consulting issuing my dad a monthly salary. And scholarship award letters granted to Jacob and Lily. All with proof. The room froze. My father pushed back his chair and stood abruptly, face flushed. "You're making this up. A college dropout with no credentials suddenly becomes a software millionaire? Lie to the world, but don't insult our intelligence. You're the one lying to yourself." I stayed quiet because I thought the family needed to keep its pride. But I'm tired of hiding everything just to be tolerated in this house. My mother whispered, as if afraid of her own voice. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I looked at her, answering slowly. "Because every time I spoke, you looked at me like I was an outsider, like I didn't belong. So I chose to help without asking for acknowledgement." Natalie leaned forward on her elbows, coldly interjecting, "I've worked 14-hour days to become a doctor. And you write code at home and suddenly you're a celebrated CEO? That's laughable. I don't deny your hard work. But you're not the only one who's struggled. I've fallen asleep on my keyboard, eaten dry ramen because I couldn't afford to boil water. I built this from nothing." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! I don't want to hear another word. You're a fraud. A disgrace to this family. Someone like you could only make money through deceit." I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. "So that's it. You don't want to know who I really am. You just want the ideal version of me that you made up. Fine." I gathered the documents, placing them carefully back in my bag. As I turned toward the door, my mother gently grabbed my wrist. "Ruby, what about next month's support?" I looked at her, my voice barely above a breath. "Mom, people who see me as a disgrace can't keep living off my money. As of today, it ends." Stepped out of the house where I had always been seen as nothing more than a burden. It was still raining, but every drop that fell on my shoulders felt impossibly light. I left Salem the very next morning. No letters, no messages. My flight to Florida departed at 6:15 a.m. from PDX. I sat by the window, watching the thin clouds dissolve over the Oregon sky I once thought I belonged to. Not anymore. 3 years ago, I bought a vacation home on the outskirts of Clearwater, just off the Tampa coast. A 3-bedroom house with a red tile roof, white paint, and a backyard full of grapefruit trees and lavender. Until now, I only visited it on rare occasions when I needed to escape the whirlwind of work. But this time, I wasn't there to take a break. I came to start over. During the first week, I cleared out the entire vacation rental interior, cheap printed art, clunky faux antique furniture, and lifeless decor. I hired a local interior architect, Elena, to transform the house into a real home, bright, clean, modern, and grounded. A place where I could breathe and just be. Meanwhile, I authorized Robert Mayatarati to send official notices to each relevant party, terminating all previously arranged financial supports. Spring Hill Funds ceased all mortgage payments on the house in Salem. Brightstone terminated its consulting contract with Mr. Douglas Lawson. The special scholarships for Natalie's children would not be renewed next year. No explanations. None needed. I didn't owe them anything anymore. 2 weeks later, I stepped into CraftLogic's new headquarters in the West Bay District Business Complex, right in the heart of Clearwater. The office was on the ninth floor of a glass building overlooking the ocean, flooded with natural light across dark walnut floors. There, I reunited with 3 key team members from Portland, Jared, Rachel, and Dominic, who had volunteered to relocate and help launch the new office. "We're resetting everything, right?" Rachel asked during our first meeting. "That's right. No more anonymity, no more double life. This is the freest chapter for the company and for me." CraftLogic didn't just survive this transition, it thrived. We secured 3 new Florida-based clients in the first quarter, and an investment fund out of Boston had just proposed a new valuation, $59.7 million, not including the AI products we were preparing to release. I no longer wore cheap jeans just to stay humble. No longer hid my expensive smartwatch under long sleeves. I didn't have to pretend to fail just to be temporarily forgiven for being different. I was the CEO. The founder, I was Ruby Lawson in every sense. I started becoming active in the local business community. One Friday evening at a Florida Women in Tech networking event, I met Caleb Meyer, a digital transformation consultant for nonprofit organizations. He had a warm smile and the kind of natural handshake that felt like you'd known him forever. We talked about using tech to connect young founders in rural areas, and then about steam grouper from a nearby Thai place. 3 weeks later, we had dinner for the 3rd time. That time, there was no more work talk. We walked barefoot on the beach at night, sharing a pair of earbuds, playing our favorite teenage songs. I didn't have to explain what my company did. I didn't have to dodge financial questions. "You're the only person I know who built an entire company and managed to keep it secret from the world," Caleb said, as we sat on the porch, listening to the soft waves. I laughed. Maybe because I used to think if they knew, they'd try to turn me into someone else. And now, if someone can't accept who I really am, they don't get to be part of my life. We clinked our mint pineapple cocktails together softly, like an unspoken promise, without strings attached. I still remember that last dinner at my parents' house. Every biting remark, every dismissive glance. But instead of letting those things eat away at me, I now use them to measure myself. Every day I live honestly is a day I've already won. I started thinking more about people like me, young individuals without fancy degrees but filled with big ideas. Not everyone can spend years grinding in the dark the way I did, and not everyone gets the chance to meet someone like Marcia Bennett at exactly the right moment. So I decided to start the Ruby Foundation with its first program called the Forge Forward Grant, a financial aid and mentorship fund for young founders without college degrees, but with promising business plans. We didn't ask where they studied, we only cared about what they wanted to build and why. The fund's announcement took place in a small auditorium at the Clearwater Tech Hub under the warm April sun and the scent of fresh roasted coffee from the corner stand. I stepped onto the stage with no papers, no teleprompter, just me. Here are people who can craft the perfect wooden chair at 16, others who develop content filtering algorithms without taking a single hour of computer science. If we deny them a chance just because they don't have the right diploma, then we're the ones lacking. We received nearly 500 applications in just the first 6 weeks. Alicia Monroe, 22 years old, living in El Paso, Texas, was the first to receive a $20,000 grant to develop a scheduling platform for local clinics. She cried during our first video call. I didn't think anyone would pick me when the education section only said high school. I smiled and gently said, "Maybe you just hadn't met the right reviewer yet." Forge Forward isn't just a fund, it's a heartfelt response to the 19-year-old version of me, the one who once curled up in a 450-square-foot apartment, wishing someone would just believe in her. One afternoon in June, while I was watering the lavender in the yard, my phone rang. The screen said Natalie. I was going to let it go to voicemail, but then I answered. "It's me," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was lower, slightly shaky. "How have you been?" "I'm okay." The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the wind through the line. I'm not calling to beg. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done. And I'm sorry. Not some generic apology, a real one. I'm sorry. I didn't see you. I didn't know what to say. I stepped into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and heard my own voice shrink. Thanks for calling. After that call, I didn't throw open every door, but I started replying to messages, asking about the kids' health, sending birthday wishes to Matthew, still from a comfortable distance. Then one Sunday morning, I received a handwritten envelope. The sender, Douglas Lawson. The handwriting slanted left, crisp and familiar, like the essays he used to mark for his students. Row B. I don't know where to begin, so I'll be direct. I was wrong. Wrong to believe there's only one path to success. Wrong to let pride blind me to your efforts. When you spoke the truth that night at dinner, I fell apart. Not because you did anything wrong, but because I realized I was no longer the man you needed me to be. If you don't want to forgive me, I understand. But I hope you know I'm proud. Yeah. I read the letter 10 times over, no tears fell, but my throat tightened with something I couldn't quite name, maybe sadness, maybe relief. I didn't call back right away, but a few days later I mailed a postcard from Sarasota. Thank you for writing. I'm building the life I've always dreamed of. If you'd like to be part of it, the only condition is respect. I kept my boundaries. I didn't return to the fantasy of a perfect family I once dreamed of, but I gave them a second chance, this time on my terms. At an informal dinner with the local women's startup community in Tampa, I shared my story, not dramatized, not sugar-coated, just simply, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to be loved by people who refuse to understand you. The room fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in applause. I realized I wasn't just healing, I was sparking something. One early summer afternoon, I was reading the paper on the back porch when my phone rang. The screen read, "Call from landline, Salem, or." I almost let it go to voicemail, like I had many times before, but something in my gut told me to answer. A soft voice came through, carefully choosing each word. "It's Mom, Linda." I didn't respond right away. She took a deep breath and continued. "Your father and I are planning to come to Florida next month. We were wondering if we could see you." A question light as the breeze, yet each word pressed heavy against my chest. 2 years ago, I was called a disgrace. And now they wanted to meet. Not to borrow money, not for medical reasons, just to meet. "In what capacity do you want to see me?" I asked, calm. "As the daughter you once cast out, or the CEO no one can ignore anymore?" "As my daughter, just my daughter, if you'll allow it." I didn't give an answer that day. I needed time, not to forgive, but to ask myself whether there was anything left that I even needed from that meeting. 3 weeks later, I chose a small coffee shop by the shore in Clearwater, where the ocean breeze rustled the palm trees like a soft soundtrack. I arrived early, chose an outdoor table, ordered a cold brew, and waited. At exactly 9 a.m., my parents arrived. Douglas walked more slowly than I remembered, his hair nearly all white. Mom wore a beige floral dress, her face softer than it used to be. They sat down. Silence lingered for nearly a minute. I didn't feel nervous. My heart didn't tighten like it once had. I just sat there, steady like the still water of the bay before me. My father broke the silence first. "I read your recent interview in Founders Weekly. What you've built, it's very impressive." I nodded, unsmiling. "Thank you." Mom placed her hand gently on the table. "It took us a long time to understand that you never needed to be anyone's copy." "No," I cut in, looking her directly in the eyes. "You don't need to say that if it's not true. I didn't come here for another polished speech." She lowered her eyes. In that rare moment, I saw my mother, the woman who used rules to control everything, finally unable to control this. My father fell quiet, then said, "You once asked me, if I didn't see you as the pride of this family, then what was I seeing? Today I want to answer, you're proof that I was wrong." Didn't expect words like that, but I didn't let them define me either. Dad, Mom, I no longer live for approval. I didn't build this life to earn praise or seek redemption. I've spent the past 2 years living more truthfully, more fully, and nothing about that makes me want to go back to any older version of myself. Mom nodded, not with anger, not in protest, just nodded. We stayed another 20 minutes, talked about the weather, the new seaside park, and Natalie's kids, even though I wasn't ready to see them yet. As we left the cafe, Mom reached out to hug me. Not too tightly, no tears, but long enough for me to feel, for the first time, that she was hugging me without trying to mold me into anything. They flew back to Salem that evening. I didn't wave goodbye. I didn't look back. I walked along the shore and texted Caleb. I did it. He called right away. Did what? I sat in front of them with no anger, no need, and still fully myself. His voice softened. Then you've already won, Ruby. Every Sunday night, I host a small dinner in my backyard. A long table, string lights glowing, homemade bread, and shared wine. There's Caleb. There's Jared. They're young founders from the Forge Forward Fund. We don't talk about payroll or valuations. We talk about purpose, about choices, and about living life with honesty. I don't need a family to take me back. I have a community that chose to stand with me from the beginning, no conditions. And I understand now, more clearly than ever, no one needs to be born into a perfect family to live a full life. They only need the courage to create it for themselves. I didn't forgive because they changed. I forgave so I could be free. And for the first time in my life, I'm not moving forward to prove anything. I'm moving forward because I'm already whole. Ruby's story isn't just about building a successful startup. It's a powerful reminder that self-worth doesn't come from family approval or prestigious degrees. In the real world, many people like Ruby are quietly building their own lives, bravely stepping outside imposed molds to live authentically. Healing doesn't always come from being forgiven. It comes from choosing not to endure anymore. Success isn't about proving something. It's about living freely, honestly, and without fear. What do you think about Ruby's choice? Would you dare to live your truth, even if it meant giving up your family's approval? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family.